a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful.
Let's get started. So, Cara, thank you so much for coming onto this podcast, for joining me and my Faking It fam. This is the most produced podcast to the date. So thank you for being the first guest and sharing the space. We're in New House in Hollywood, right?
Noya House.
Noya House.
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a lot of E's in there, so I totally get it.
All right. Yeah, I tend to mispronounce things, so thank you for correcting me.
Thank you for having me. It's a real joy to be here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you like so much. You have been such a big person in my life, actually, in these past few years. And truly, when I think about my own personal growth from being 21 and now almost 23, you have been really the source of so much of that. Like really, really, truly. So like, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I value you so much, and I'm so grateful to know you and for you to be in my life and for us to continue our relationship in the future too.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry. It's really been so cool to see you step into empowering women specifically, and people, but specifically women and queer women around like fully being their authentic selves. So I admire you so much, and I'm really grateful to be here and to be trusted in the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, thank you. And everything that I've done, you're like kind of my source for a lot of it too. So everybody should be thankful to Cara for motivating me to do me too, you know, like you really helped with that. And so I would love to just share how we met each other, who you are a little bit, and then just dive into why we're here together right now.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'll start with our story. I don't even know if I told you this, but I was at a gynecologist, like Dr. Goldberg. Do you know?
Yeah. Actually, there's something you don't know.
Okay.
When I started my business, I was like, how am I going to get clients? And I made a spreadsheet of like every holistic gynecologist in New York City. Okay. And I sent them all an email being like, I do this thing if you want to like talk to me. He's the only one that responded.
Wow.
I went in and I had like one conversation with his daughter who was like so sweet, and like I think I impacted her because we talked about, you know, some of the stuff that like you and I have talked about. And she was like, said to her dad, this lady is legit.
Yeah.
And then I never heard anything again from them. And you're the only person.
Wow.
And it was like a year later. So I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know
but
that.
Obviously it was a worth. And to anybody out there starting a business, like sometimes you just throw shit at a wall and you see what sticks.
Totally. And honestly, like if you throw 100 pieces of shit at the wall, usually one will stick. And so it's just like, think about that, you know? Like,
yeah. And here we are.
And here we are. And that's how life is a little bit too, you know?
Yes. So you were at your gynecologist.
I was at my gynecologist, and I ended up having this super long, deep conversation with him about like literally for 2 hours about life, about love. And he gave me this like advice on love actually that I think I'll just share because it's actually like stuck with me for a while. And he said that his wife just likes when the bed is made every morning, and like she has like 20 pillows that she likes. And so every morning they like spend like 15 minutes like making the bed perfect and pristine, you know? And like he knows that if he doesn't do this, it's just going to make her upset. Even though it's something small, he just knows that like these small things to your partner, like if they matter, then just do them, you know, even if they don't matter to you, just because like little things tend to build up. And so that was like his piece of relationship advice that has stuck with me through my first relationship. Yeah, that's a random thing.
So beautiful.
It was really beautiful. And I felt comfortable to say to him that I never had an orgasm. And that's kind of how he introduced me to you. And he's like, well, I have this business card. And he's like looking through his desk. He's like trying to find like your business card. He's like, hey, like this like woman that like I know I met somewhere or something. And maybe you should reach out to her and she might be able to help you. And I was like, okay, you know, took the business card with me. It said like alchemist on it. Like there's like two like triangles,
that
you know,
like vulvas. Yeah, that was my first business card. We've both come a long way.
Totally.
I'm like, I don't give those out anymore.
I kind of love this, even like on this podcast, and we're going to capture like your progression in your career too, because we've both grown so much then in these past few years, which is really cool.
It is really cool. I remember you coming on to the first, like we had a Zoom call and you were like in Italy or something. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, like I want to help you.
It was a trial. Yeah, I remember that. You're like, I'm going to see if I'm going to take you on. I have very few clients that I work with. Let me see if our vibes like connect, you know? I'm like, I got to put my best behavior for this like it's an interview, you know?
I think it's just really important when you're getting support that the fit is right.
Totally.
So like for anybody who's looking for a coach or for a therapist, I know that it can feel like you don't even want to start looking, because to spill your guts to somebody and then they're not right. It's sort of like dating. It's like, do I have to like have 5 different conversations to find the right person? But like you're giving, it's a real sacred privilege to have access to somebody's like innermost thoughts, feelings, history, trauma, narrative. Like you want to find somebody that you trust and you feel safe with. And so on my end too, like I don't take people on who I don't feel like I can help, because it ends really badly.
Yeah, no, totally. I think like something about business is that successful businesses say no as much as they say yes, you know, and being able to like find what feels most authentic to you, turning down money for the most part, you know, to just really actually make real impact and be genuine to your like identity and your brand. So
yeah,
I totally respect that you do that. And it is nice that we did connect and that we got to where we are.
Totally.
And I even like saw some sex therapists before coming to you, and like you do life coaching and all those things, but I didn't connect to any of them. And so I think what I thought was so interesting from our first conversation is that we didn't talk about sex. You know, we didn't talk about body. We just talked about life and just connected on that front, and then found that we have this like vibe that we can actually work with.
Yeah.
And that's it really.
Well, you're actually one of the last clients that I took on to do support around sexuality, because I do mostly business coaching and general life coaching now.
Yeah.
And so that was a big part of the consideration too. But I felt like really like I could help you, because what's interesting when you say we didn't talk about sex at all, like the reason that I transitioned from doing mostly sexuality, like I did a sex coaching training program. So that is my background. And like my undergrad degree is in theories and politics of sexuality as it relates to intersectional feminism. So like I have a sexuality background, but I was like initially looking into becoming a social worker and like doing private practice. So like the longer I've been in the self-development space, the more I've kind of seen how you do one thing is how you do everything. So like if I'm talking to somebody about sexuality, we have to talk about their life.
Right.
Like if I'm talking to somebody about why their business is not successful, we probably have to talk about like why they're mad at their mom. Like there's not, and especially now, like now I work with companies, now I work with people who are like building multi 6-figure businesses. And the things that they're talking about and struggling with and that are getting in the way of them feeling successful are not dissimilar to like what's keeping someone from having an orgasm. A fundamental feeling of being unworthy and like so stuck in their thoughts about that they actually can't achieve what they want. It's the same thing.
Totally. And that's why like on this podcast, even the slogan is fake it till you make it, not faking orgasms, because it's about how much our sex life and like that side of what goes on in the bedroom actually is connected to everything else. You know, like sex positivity is so important, and it translates into our outside life too, and how we relate with both of those things is so important to face and to talk about. And so the fact that you are able to go from both sides of it, you know, talk about like in the bedroom and out of it is also so powerful and so like holistic, such a holistic approach to life coaching that I think is so unique and so special, and what makes you such a good like educator and coach in that way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think for me, it just like, cause I wanted to start as a sex coach, right? I wanted to, I like talking about sex.
It's so much fun. It's my favorite topic.
So that was my initial, you know, when I started, I was like, oh, I want to specifically work on sex. But like the more that I was working with people, I was like, this is somebody's entire life. And like, I actually felt limited scoping it so fully. Not that there aren't some like really amazing educators out there that specialize in that. And like now I'm at a point that if somebody came to me for that kind of work, I would probably refer them to one of those people. But that what I really enjoy is like getting to the fundamental core of like what's in the way of what you want. And like, let's look at that. Like, let's take a really, really deep look at that, because is it true? Like, is it real? Is it a story from somebody else? And I think like back to how that's related to sexuality and related to like why you and I clicked so well is I think it's a bigger picture of like, what's going on socially,
Right.
what's going on in our world. Like we live
Right.
in a really interesting and dynamic time, like the things that are happening for women's rights in our country right now. It's
Yeah.
like, well, that's bred in a space of creating shame. Like those kinds of things are perpetuated when we ignore or shame or hide or like apply even disgust and judgment to things that are fundamentally normal that we all do.
Totally. And I think that's like a really big part of being able to experience pleasure in our own bodies is kind of the emotional sides of things, you know, like our psychology, how we feel. These are all things that you taught me through our work together. And I was wondering, because I know there are so many people that exist, so many friends of mine that still can't orgasm too. And so I was wondering, like, if you have, I mean, like, we can share what you said to me, even. I'm happy to share like our journey through that. But I would love to just like encourage people or tell people something to just make them feel less crazy for not being able to orgasm, because it's actually very normal.
It's so normal.
Yeah.
And especially like some people, they can orgasm alone, but they can't with a partner, or they can orgasm with a toy, but they can't with their hands. Like there's not a one size fits all approach, but I think hearing somebody else's journey can be really inspiring, even if just opening the door of like, oh, well, if Miriam did it, then like I can totally do it too.
Yeah.
So if you did want to share what you found impactful, and then maybe I could provide like general advice.
All right. Yeah. So I would say the first thing you said to me is that you're normal. And then you made me read the book Come As You Are, which is an incredible book about just showing how normal it is to not be able to orgasm, how it's like in our head and not something that's, you know, physical a little bit, and how that it's okay that it's in your head and not that like you should try to force it out of your head. I think that was another big part of it too. And then for me, I would say like we actually had to do a lot of digging into my past for the most part, and like how I relate with other people. So one thing I think that was pretty like a breakthrough for our work was when you were talking about, you're asking me how I like show love to people. And I said that I like giving. And I think that was a big source. One of the big sources as to why I wasn't able to orgasm was because I always couldn't just receive like the pleasure that I was getting from other people. It like felt uncomfortable to me a little bit. And without the idea of thinking I have to give back in return. Yeah. And so like that's something that we worked through together. And then also, like, I know that with your practice, you talk a lot about like the internal dialogue of things. Do you want to explain like what that is? And it applied a lot to our experience together too.
Yeah. Well, I think something that is unique to my practice that has stuck the entire time that I've had it, no matter what iteration it's been in, is that I invite people to embody the energy that, even if it feels like it's aspirational, it's like it actually is already inside of you. So for you, can I say what?
No, please. Like, I'm open. This, like, with the Faking It fam, I am an open book, open vagina, open everything.
Well, it was a pleasure princess, wasn't
right?
It?
Yeah,
that was it. So and like everybody who works with me, like they have a different one. So like sometimes it's like an empress, sometimes it's a leader, or like cultivating the inner CEO. But essentially, like. And I've had people come to me and be like, that's an aspirational energy. It doesn't exist inside of me. And what I want to encourage people when I'm saying, because it might feel vague if you've like not had somebody guide you through it, right? Like, okay, hypothetically, like who would I like to aspire to be within myself? If you can imagine that that's what you want, like you have the capability to create that within yourself, like you can live into that. And it's been interesting, like I've even worked with someone who like she chose queen and she was convinced like there was no queen there, like that was a hypothesis, and like that there was no way she could access it. And it's, to me, it's like I can see it, and that's my job as a practitioner, to have, when somebody comes in, to like see them in their light, to see them in their goodness, to see them in their potential. And so like I try to approach anybody who's coming to me with that kind of generosity of perspective, so that they feel safe to like even see it in themselves. But like I've never met a single person who doesn't have that inside of them. And like you've met that version of yourself, like maybe you really like sports, and it's like you met it when you did something really profoundly physical that you like didn't think you could master, and you were like, fuck yeah, you know. Or maybe like you're a really amazing artist and like you lose yourself in the art and you go into that space, and it's like reality doesn't exist anymore. And it's like you have that like aspirational energy. Maybe it's in how you love a pet or a parent or a partner, like that there's like a cleanness of it and a clarity of it that
Mhm.
feels open and easy for you to sit in.
Right.
And then when it's like about yourself, like claiming your self-worth, claiming your potential, claiming pleasure, claiming things that you feel like maybe you don't deserve, all of a sudden that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
And it's like, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
It's inside you.
Right. So it's kind of not about like creating these parts of yourself, but identifying what's already inside of you. Like identifying, for me, I needed to identify my pleasure princess.
Yes.
And then you channel that energy when you're like doing things that like are around pleasure, or like channeling your business boss, you know, like
Mhm.
whatever it is that you want to identify. And so
Yeah.
that's like the internal dialogue that you have with yourself that helps you just like actualize and be who you are already,
Yeah.
kind of.
I think
So.
it's great in terms of like you were talking about faking it, fam. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, fake it. Like fake it in the beginning.
Right.
Like maybe it doesn't feel authentic. Fake it. Like
Mhm.
sometimes when I am going into something that I feel like is going to be emotionally intense or scary, I'll literally look in the mirror and like talk to myself from the version of myself that I
Right.
aspire to be. I'm like,
Mm.
you got this. I see you. I'm still going to love you if you fuck up.
Right.
Like, and you look really hot today and you smell
Yes.
amazing and we're doing it.
If you smell amazing, it's all good, you know? For some reason, that's like my biggest fear in life, just like smelling bad. Like, I don't know why. Like, I'm gonna start saying that to myself. You smell so fucking good,
Yes,
you know?
just let yourself know. It's like we're good to go.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But even if it's aspirational, like
Yeah.
I used to do that too, you know, when going on dates. Like I used to get so nervous when I would go on dates that I would get like insanely sweaty
Yeah.
to the
I
point
get
that I
that.
like wouldn't feel comfortable touching the person because my hands were like dripping,
clammy?
dripping.
Okay, like a shower from your hands. Got it.
And I would just like say to myself, like I would pick 3 things that I would be embodying. And maybe it was like presence and curiosity and flirtatiousness. And I would just like
Ooh.
go into the date being like, I'm present, I'm curious, I'm playful. And like I would say it over and over again. And it's like, yeah, was it faking it, or was it like finding the place inside of myself that knows how to be playful and curious and flirtatious? Like I found her, and then she got to come out and hang out, which is better than the alternative, which is like, oh my God, I'm so anxious, I can't do it. It's
I'm
like,
not playful enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough.
yeah,
too.
it's just a story.
Right. Totally.
It's not even true unless you decided.
And I think something that you just said now too that's really interesting is that it's not just about identifying this like person inside of us, but it's also speaking from them. And then like that's kind of an action that you take that really like solidifies your connection to yourself. And I remember that in our work together, one of the assignments you gave me was to write a love letter to myself from the Pleasure Princess. And so I'm like, hi Miriam, this is a Pleasure Princess speaking. What's up? Like I literally wrote that, you know. I'm like, you're such a hot bitch, you know, like
Yes.
and like it was a whole like page long of me just like talking to myself from the Pleasure Princess. And as like silly as that sounds, and something that I think I did with you too is just kind of let go of like norms and expectations and just like embrace whatever it is that you said I should embrace, you know, just like try it out. Like, and I'm really happy I did that because it worked. You know, like talking to myself from the Pleasure Princess actually helped me embody that part of myself and really channel it when I was having sex or when I was wanting to please myself on my own, you know, and just get into the mindset that sex is about real pleasure. And like what pleasure actually is just feeling good. It's not about like stimulation or sensation. It's just about how you feel. That's why it's like very emotional. And so like I learned all of that through doing these different practices. And I think another thing that we did together too was like the parts work. Do you want to explain what that is too? Because I thought that was so new to me as well. Which I think is super interesting.
And I think what like we're speaking to that a little bit already, which is just this idea that there are different parts of us. And like what you were saying made me think about how fundamentally for most people what these things are about is feeling safe.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people spend their lives not being able to discern the difference between feeling unsafe and feeling uncomfortable. And people have great reasons for that. Like you're normal, you make sense. Like we all come into our experiences of identity and sexuality and power with our own narratives and journeys. Right. And so like if we're being shown that our sexuality is like only valuable or legitimate like through a very specific lens and landscape, it can feel unsafe. Like we might interpret it as unsafe to be our authentic self, because we might think that it's weird or that it's gross or that it's shameful or that like we might be upsetting our parents or our entire communities or that we're going to ruin our lives. And for some people, that's actually true. Like for some people, there is a legitimate factor of being unsafe in that. And I want to acknowledge that, because I don't know who's listening to this. But for most people, it's just that you're uncomfortable because you've been taught a certain thing. So you think you're unsafe, but you're just uncomfortable, because the truth is, like, you know, even if I remember one time after hooking up with somebody, I tripped over my own foot and fell into a sliding glass door, and all the blinds fell down.
Were you at like their place, or
it
like...
was my childhood bedroom?
Okay.
I was like, I think I was like 18 or 19.
Okay.
But like, that was hilarious.
Right.
Like, it was great. Like, I remember that moment very fondly.
Oh, cool. Like, did you actually think it was hilarious, or were you like...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. That's
but
cool.
like, I think one of the reasons maybe I am good at this work is I felt like in those places I haven't experienced, we all struggle with shame, but I think I was just like, that's like, I didn't care.
It's all just funny games.
It was funny.
That's
Maybe
awesome.
if I was also with somebody who I was like comfortable with and in a relationship with, I'm sure if that was like somebody I had hooked up with, I would have been mortified. But like, that's what
awesome.
I mean. It's like, I was safe. And like, I think it's that feeling of being safe that and I think a lot of people don't think about safety. Or even their experience of safety. They think about how they look or what this means about them, or like if they can get the other person to affirm something about them that they don't see in themselves. And it's like, then you're not there. And you actually don't feel safe, because you're like telling yourself a story that you're not safe, even if you don't consciously realize that you're doing it. And then you're just stuck. And so parts work is about like finding that place within yourself that feels unsafe. And for most of us, it's like a really young child part. It's like, you know, the 3-year-old version of you who like somebody made fun of the way that you looked in class, and now you're carrying around that, like, I don't know, the mole on your stomach is like gross, and like whoever is hooking up with you, that's all they're thinking about, right? Like, and that's like a random example. Or it's like the 12-year-old version of you that got your period on something, and then everyone in class made fun of you, and now like you think your vagina is gross. Or somebody who's been like reading magazines their whole life that's telling them that their body is not the right size, and like that's what they're thinking about. And so when we look at parts work, what we do is we try to find like the formative memory that created a feeling of like, I'm not worthy because of this. Somebody's not going to love me because of this. Like, I can't do this because of this. And we actually like have a conversation with that part.
No, there's something so powerful about identifying this part of us. And I think for me, I remember when you were asking me to like, what does it look like? You know, and at first I was like, how do I like do that? You know, but then you just kind of do it. And the first thing that came to my mind was like a hamburger, like a giant hamburger. I don't know if you remember that.
Say more. Catch me up.
There's like this giant angry hamburger that was just like overlooking the pleasure princess, you know, and just like, you're like, okay, now like have a dialogue between those two parts of you. And I like was doing that. And I think, I don't know, it seems so like crazy for some people, because it doesn't like fit norms of like Western ways of approaching like therapy and like coaching, but it really works. It like really, really works. And just being able to just have conversations with yourself through different parts of yourself genuinely. And it kind of just allows for this closure gap, or it kind of allows for you to really overcome something, or just like pass through those emotions that you're experiencing. And so I think it's so powerful. And I just like think this work that you do is really incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to say for people listening, like, it doesn't have to be as visceral or obvious, like as a hamburger.
Right.
Like for somebody listening, they might be like, oh, well, that would be impossible for me. And whenever I go into experiences like that with people, I'm like, there's literally no way to do this wrong, even if all you're doing is imagining what this part of you might say and you see nothing. Like what you think you might say is really valuable information. And so and there are a lot of like people who utilize these kinds of tools and different tools to like help people get access. I know for me, I'm not somebody who generally, when I go into meditation, like sees something really clearly, but I also feel like this kind of like, she's real to me, but she's like a 3-year-old who is really hypersensitive and like has temper tantrums and gets sad and like worries if my partner doesn't text me back in a couple of hours, if I'm being abandoned.
Right.
And like, I'm just like, hey girl, hey, I see you.
Right.
You're having those feelings again. Like,
Right.
I'm going to hold them for you.
Yeah.
Whereas like 25-year-old me would have sent like 45 text messages to be like, are you mad at me? Did I do something? And it's like, I've been able to, in my own work on myself, grow out of my like need to do that through just engaging with, like, even if it's imaginary, like the part of you that is having the feeling, and then you get to like separate from it a little bit. And in that distance, there's a really good quote. I can't remember who said it. It's like, there's a space between emotion and consciousness. And like in that space, like you have all the power to like make a really important change. And I think so many of us like feel the feeling, oh, I'm ashamed, I'm shutting down, or like, oh, I'm angry, like I'm lashing out. And like, we don't pause to be like, okay, what am I angry about? Like, what am I sad about? Can I be like, hey, I hear you,
right?
But like, we're not gonna act from that space. I'm actually just gonna like listen to that space. And we'd have a very different world if everybody knew how to do that.
Totally. I think the idea of, I heard somebody say this recently, like, it's okay to feel things deeply, you know? And I think that's so true, especially in our society right now. We try to just mask our pain and discomforts with, you know, scrolling on Instagram, or just like disconnecting or connecting to something that isn't actually very like real or feels real to us, because we don't want to feel things. But I think that people at the end of the day strive to feel, you know, and it's like this constant battle of, I don't want to feel pain, but I want to feel pleasure. I don't want to feel alone, but I don't want to be hanging out with these people. And just like this battle, internal battle of constantly not wanting to feel deeply, not wanting to really experience what is going on with us so we can actually go through the pain, you know? And I think that's like something that we definitely need to be okay with for the most part.
And I think people think that that's happening outside of them. They're like, oh, this is my experience because my external circumstances are these things. And it's like, no, you're creating that reality because you've decided, like, I don't want to sit with that. That's uncomfortable. So I'm going to push it off, push it off, push it off. Why do I not feel authentic in my relationships? Why do I feel like I can't get close to people? Why have I been looking for a partner for a long time, but I can't find someone? And then you say like, oh, well, it's because nobody really is looking for a serious relationship. And it's really hard to meet people in LA. And everybody is just on their phones nowadays. And it's like, no, you've decided that everybody is like that. And you've decided that you don't want to sit with the discomfort. And so now your reality is a mirror for that. And you can spend your entire life blaming everybody else for that. And this is actually like the crux of what I do with most of my clients is like, you want to change something? Like, let's talk about what it is. And if you were taking 100% responsibility for your role to play in the creation, like, what would you change?
Got it. So it's kind of just like putting yourself in the driver's seat of any situation and just identifying ways that, even if like circumstantially it's very difficult to overcome something, just seeing how can I actually change this like productively. And it can be small, you know, like maybe going out with friends somewhere and having like a friend of yours set you up with somebody, you know, like maybe that's a way to make a more authentic relationship connection. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that all of your problems have in common is you. And so it can feel really scary, but it's also empowering if you're like, well, if I'm the thing that all my problems have in common, then that means that I can change them because I have control and agency over myself. And I think a lot of people don't imagine that that's even possible for them. And I can tell you now, having coached like hundreds of people, that it absolutely is. And my own life is an example too. Like, there are so many things that I've been able to change that caused me suffering that I don't experience anymore. And it's because of doing this work.
So kind of like being okay with discomfort. And that's like a big part of what faking it's about too. You know, it's like being comfortable with the uncomfortable, going into spaces that feel kind of risky or scary because you've never been there before, but you're going there because you know you should be going in that direction, and it does feel authentic to you, even if it doesn't feel like very familiar, you know? And so it's about like identifying those parts of yourself and like really embracing them.
And that it's safe to be uncomfortable. Like that being in that feeling you may be like, oh my God, I want to run away. Like
Mm-hmm.
my every part of my body is like, no.
Right.
And you know, that's how you feel before you jump out of an airplane.
Right.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and if you make sure like, okay, I have a support system, like I have
Right.
my friend, my mom, I have a coach, maybe like I have these practices that I can trust to hold me.
Right.
I can trust that like if I get in over my head, I'm gonna have my own back. Like so you have an umbrella, or what's it called when you jump out of a plane? Is it an
Parachute.
Parachute. Thank you.
An umbrella might work.
You're like Mary
It's
Poppins.
a big one. She's a big umbrella.
But you know what I mean. With that visual or not, it's like, are you unsafe or are you uncomfortable? And if you're willing to be uncomfortable, you can change your life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think you're an amazing example of that.
Thank you.
To go from living in a community to one that is like so radically different. Like I imagine that must have been uncomfortable.
Totally. It was uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, I knew I was supposed to be experiencing these new things, you know, like as much, and I obviously, it was scary and sometimes a little bit unsafe actually, because I actually had no idea that it's not the smartest thing to go into a room by yourself with a boy who wants to drink with you. I didn't realize that he'd try to like touch me, and like I didn't know that was like a thing that happens, you know. And so it's also good to like navigate that and understand that sometimes like you should be very intentional, but it is also important to like go out there. Like me trying pepperoni pizza for the first time, wearing pants on a Saturday, you know, just like trying chocolate covered bacon, just like all of that. You just kind of, it's good to do that. It's good to just put yourself out there. And then you learn more about yourself by doing so.
Yeah.
So,
and you've continued, I think your life is an example of that, like to also put so much of who you are for the world to see and to be like, I'm going to share my authentic self with the world.
Yeah.
Is like very consciously putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
Totally. But
I think we don't really truly appreciate joy and happiness if we don't like work in some sense for it. Like, you know, the love that I have in my relationship is the byproduct of doing like a lot of hard work.
Totally.
A lot of which happened before we ever got together.
Totally.
And in my business, like I didn't know how I was gonna. I mean, I spent like the first 6 months of my business like only eating lentil soup because I didn't have any money to buy more food. But I was just like, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because like I have an end game here, and that is like bringing this like forth, and like I can sit in this until then. And like I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can't sit in that, and so then they don't try, but then they are not happy.
Totally. No, even like right now, us sitting with this like microphone set up, I just started working with Purple Banter, which like this incredible production company, and just like the growth already of this podcast just shows that it's okay to not know what you're doing, and like working and eating lentil soup for a couple months with like the vision and the belief in yourself that this is going to be something, and even if it's not, at least I know that I gave it my all, you know, and that how that's enough. And that's so powerful too.
And that like failure is what you define it to be.
Totally.
So like when I started my business, the thought that I had was, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, so there's literally no way that it's not going to work. And that thought meant that like any perceived failures, like somebody saying they didn't want me to teach a workshop, or like getting on a bunch of client calls and receiving a bunch of no's, or like investing in a program and having some things reflected back to me that I didn't want to hear about myself that I needed to hear in order to become better at what I was doing. Like some people would be like, oh, that means that I failed and it's not working, so never mind. Like to me, I interpreted, like it was a conscious choice to interpret any of those things as like, this is helping me become like better at what it is that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. There's literally no possible way that I could fail. And I think a lot of people approach like they're collecting reasons for why not. And so like collect a big basket of reasons of why not, and you could just like stay sitting where you're sitting.
And then for me, the way I think about why not actually is kind of the opposite. So like, why not start a podcast? Why not build a website? Why not post a YouTube video? You know, like why not? Like I think a lot of the times also to do something, we need to find a reason to do it. And that actually prevents us from trying new things. It's like, I'm going to wait till I get invited, or I have a friend in Tokyo to go to Tokyo. Or I'm going to wait until I have this to do that, you know? And for me, like my why not mindset is actually completely the opposite. And it's more like, let me just do this for the sake of doing it. Like that's it. like no reason, you know? And I think that's really exciting because that means that you can just go do anything. You don't really need a reason to do something.
Yeah. And if you're, again, like you're waiting for your external circumstances to dictate what's going on inside,
Yeah,
it's the opposite.
totally.
Like sometimes, sure, maybe you meet somebody who wants to invite you to Tokyo, but
Right.
like that could be 20 years from now.
Exactly. What are like some general things that you would say that like you help people with through life coaching?
Well, right now, most of my clients are people starting businesses.
Mhm.
So I help, and I chose to do that after being in business for a couple of years and realizing, like originally with working with sexuality,
Yeah.
that I wanted to help liberate people from feelings of shame and unworthiness
Yeah.
as it relates to sexuality.
Mhm.
And then through fully embodying my own success, which
Yeah.
I would say is like one of the most profound personal journeys like I've ever taken on in my own life.
Yeah.
I like really wanted to help liberate people in that way. So
Mm.
specifically people who were like, I have this idea and it feels like my soul's mission to like bring this forth to the world.
Mhm.
And I also feel like I don't know exactly, quote unquote, how. And I think if I didn't know how when I was like sending a bunch of emails to a bunch of gynecologists.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, totally.
We could have said like before I met you, I would have
Yeah.
told anybody that was a total waste of like 8 hours of my life.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it also like bore fruit in this like really beautiful client coach relationship that
Right.
now we're here like a year and a half later.
Right.
There was also, I
So
just
cool.
thought of another example of like something I did. Oh, I was like teaching free classes for this women's center
Cool.
just because I like wanted to create networking opportunities.
Mhm.
And I got some clients from it.
Mhm.
And like me early on would have been like, I need to get paid my hourly rate in order to like show up and teach classes.
Right.
And now I'm like, no, like this is a relationship business. Like
yeah.
I want people who meet me to be impacted by this work and like tell their friends.
Yeah.
So like I didn't know how
Mhm.
when I started. I was like making a lot of mistakes.
Right.
I was like doing things and seeing if they worked.
Right.
And so people coming to me looking for how, like I'm not going to tell you how, but what I am going to like help align you to is that your mission is possible.
Okay.
Like this is what you need to look at within yourself that's
Mhm.
getting in the way.
Mhm.
You know, feelings of unworthiness, feelings of it being impossible, feelings like failure,
Mhm.
being so big, or like not believing in your dream enough. I would say generally, like I don't work with people who are completely new
Okay.
to bringing their work into the world at this point. It's like
Okay.
people who have a concept and they have the thought that I had, like this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, and there's absolutely no way that it's not going to work.
Okay.
I
got
help
it.
people build that.
Okay.
And then I also have clients who come to me to heal family trauma and belief of unworthiness. And
Yeah.
like that can look like sexuality,
Right.
that can look like finding partnership, that
Mhm.
can look like self-love, that can look like negotiating more money at your job,
Right.
like building a life that you love.
Yeah.
But essentially, I would advise anybody who's like interested in this kind of work to really think about like, what do I have in my life that persists that I say that I don't want? And if I were taking 100% responsibility for it being me who created that,
Mhm.
what would I be taking responsibility for? Like, how am I creating it?
Got it.
And then if they're interested, like there are a lot of amazing coaches out there. Something I love about this industry is I don't think it's competitive. Like there are more than enough clients
That's awesome.
for all of us.
That's cool.
So
love that.
I also coach a ton of coaches. So like
Wow,
if people
cool.
are listening to this and they're like, where do I begin? Like
yeah.
they can fill out a client application with me. I may or may not have space, but like I have lots of great people to
Right.
like
If they
refer
vibe
them
with you,
to.
then maybe.
Yeah. But also just because I like am really passionate about connecting people to
Right.
like there are really incredible people out there doing this work, and
Right.
do a couple calls. Like don't
Yeah.
just do a call with one person, do like 3 or 4 calls.
Yeah.
Like
See if it's a good match. and-
yeah.
Yeah. And I think also like even doing this work with somebody, like having a life coach. For me, when I was like 21 and I reached out to you, in my head, I decided that the startup of this year, because I love entrepreneurship, I've always like been doing companies. But when I turned 21, I decided to not work on any startup, but the startup will be myself. And like that's literally what I like journaled, like 2021, my startup is me. And that means I'm going to help myself build myself, like my self-love and value. And I was like seeing you, and I was talking to another therapist and like talking to people about like body image things and trying to just like fix myself or just improve myself in the ways that I wanted to improve and put the work in. Because I think a big part of this too that people may not think about is that you actually have to like do a lot of work, and there's a lot of intention and time that it takes to really have self-improvement, you know, and like identify what's going on inside of you. And a lot of your work does all of that. And I think it's a good investment, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it carries on.
And I want to say that it's like a brave thing to commit to doing that work.
Yeah.
And it is work. Like it has been, you know, tremendously challenging for me personally. I'll speak to my experience being the client. Like it's been really challenging to look at some stuff in my life that I didn't want to look at. But what I will tell you was more uncomfortable and like harder was living in a way that left me fundamentally unhappy. So like even though it was a lot of work, like it so greatly contributed. I mean, I'm making more money than I've ever made. I like have a beautiful partner who I feel like really like the safe, most emotionally mature relationship I've ever had. Like I feel more comfortable in my body than I've ever felt in my life. And like all of that was because like I worked on it. Yeah. So people who are like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, well, is it more comfortable? Not liking these things that you have that you don't want? Like, and if you are willing to take that on, it's a brave choice. And it is like a choice that is a privilege to take on for a lot of people. And whether that be with a coach or a therapist or your own like personal work that you decide to do, reading books and journaling, whatever it is that you're doing, it's a brave choice. And like we collectively, like if we wanted to look at like what's the best for all of us, like we'd all have a better planet if everybody took that work on.
Totally. And I remember one big takeaway also from us working together, that it was a realization that I had to confront, which was, I haven't thought about it for years until we started talking, was that when I started like masturbating when I was like 17, I started doing it because I had an eating disorder and I was using my vibrator, and like the sensations I was getting from that actually made me less hungry. And so I think like something that we realized together is that it could be that my body is like against orgasms a little bit just because of its correlation with how I used it in a very unhealthy way, you know? And I think really after I like identified that, because I just forgot completely that I did that. After I identified that, I was able to really overcome it. And I remember, I don't know if I called you or texted you, I was like, I had an orgasm. I don't remember how
I think it was a voice note.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure I saved the voice note.
Okay, cool. It happened. It was amazing. Finally.
It was so fun. I remember our intro call too. Because I don't usually work with people. Like we had a shorter package time. Like I generally work with people for at least 6 months, and we did 3 months. And I was like, if you wanted, I was like, if you want to have an orgasm, like we'll do 3 months. You're gonna have an orgasm in 6 weeks.
And I was like, okay, I've been trying for years. Like I've like been to people. I've downloaded guides. You know, like I have like 30 vibrators. Like,
and that was exactly it. It was like you were trying so hard. I was like, just like don't try. Just like if you stop trying, like that'll probably like heal 85% of it. And like for people listening who are having this problem, I don't want to make it sound like you just go talk to somebody for 3 months and stop trying and it'll work. Cause like we all have different reasons for like why this is presenting. But like you had such a willingness and an eagerness to like go get it. And I'm like, there's nothing to get. Like, just enjoy it. Just like, and so it was just a small shift in thought.
And I think also for people listening, something that I struggled with so much was I identify as a feminist, you know, and I felt comfortable about sex, but for some reason I just couldn't orgasm. So I'm just putting it out there that if you're a feminist, it's okay if you can't orgasm. It doesn't mean you're not a true feminist, okay? And that you still are sexually empowered. You can be sexually empowered and not know how to orgasm yet. You just have to confront some things about yourself and read some books, and you know, Come As You Are is really a really good resource. Do you have any more resources for people, life coaching related or personal development or anything?
So Come As You Are is a really great book for it, and I just want to name Dr. Emily Nagoski who wrote that book because she deserves credit for that. I'm trying to think of like a really foundational. I love Byron Katie. I think Byron Katie is amazing. She
Right.
has a process called The Work.
Okay.
And she has these, they're called 4 questions to change your life. So if you're like thinking about something that feels like it's a thought that's really something that you're struggling with. So say, for example, what was a thought that you had about your inability to orgasm, that it made you not a feminist? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Is that true?
No, obviously. Right.
So that's the first question. Is it true? And like the answer is usually no. And then the second question is, can you absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that it's true?
Right.
And you can never know.
Right.
And then the third question is, who are you with the thought? Who are you? How does Miriam navigate the world with the thought, me not being able to orgasm makes me not a feminist? How does that make you feel and show up in your life?
Less authentic, or, you know, like a faker, but in a
Yeah.
bad way.
So who would you be if you didn't have that thought?
A feminist.
Yeah. So she has like a ton of YouTube videos where you
Cool.
can watch her like go through the process with people, and it's so great. And it works. Like, say you're having an argument with somebody who's really important to you, and you're like, this person didn't have my best interest in mind. It's like,
Right.
is it true? You might really believe that it's true, but can you know that it's true?
Right.
No.
Right.
Who are you with the thought? Someone totally unwilling to have a conversation that could be productive and healing. Who would you be if you like put that thought to the side? Someone able to navigate conflict.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah. So
That's
Byron
awesome.
Katie is awesome. Love me some Brene Brown. I feel like I'm giving
Yes.
like such obvious examples, but love Brene Brown. And then you know this, I'm like obsessed with astrology, and I think Chani Nicholas is the absolute best astrologer that anybody
Cool.
who is interested in intersectional feminism could
Hmm.
follow, because
Alright.
she uses astrology to like talk about social change in a way that I think is like really uplifting and inspiring.
Cool.
I can't recommend her app enough. And those are just like a few that came to mind. I have
Awesome.
an email list. I like send emails out every single Monday, and I have resource guides
Cool.
that I send out in my email list of like,
Okay.
I'm reading this and I like it. I'm listening to this and I like it. So
Cool. Where can people find that?
if they go to my website, so carakovacs.com, check the spelling in the title of this podcast.
Yeah.
And you can subscribe there. And I'm taking a little social media break, but
Okay.
they can follow me at Cara Kovacs Coaching on Instagram.
Awesome. And last question that I ask every guest of mine is, how have you faked it?
So you told me you were going to ask me this
I
question,
know.
and I was like, okay, I will say I've never faked an orgasm.
Yay! That's
I've
awesome.
instead been like, you can actually stop because I'm just rude, apparently.
That's good. We need to embrace that more. just stop
I'll do it myself.
Just get off.
I was a lot younger when I was doing that to people. I don't do that
That's
anymore.
awesome.
But I do think like my business was really faking it until I made it. Like
Right.
I was living in this shoebox on the Upper East Side. Like me and my roommate shared it. We didn't even have room to have a couch. Like it had no living room. We had like a love seat
Wow.
next to a refrigerator, and the only thing that fit in my bedroom was a full-size bed.
Okay.
And I did like all my first sessions like on Zoom on that full-size bed.
Right.
And I had done a coaching certification, but like I had this vision, and the vision was like a sold out private practice and like teaching classes and supporting people and empowering themselves.
Yeah.
And there was this thought of like, who am I to do that from my full-size bed in my apartment that can't fit a couch in it? But I like really was like, no, I know the power of this, and I know that I can create it, and I just need to like breathe into that until it is the reality. And like now I have a custom blue velvet sectional that I got made for. Yeah, I was like, I'm getting a couch.
Yeah.
I'm getting the nicest couch I can imagine. But yeah, that was definitely a faking it for probably a good 2 years. The first 2 years, I was like, all right, I'm going to see what works.
That's awesome. And I love that you had a goal too. It was like, this couch means a lot to me. Like when I hit that point where I can get that couch, like it's everything, you know? And I think it's so good to identify those goals too. So it's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the Faking It podcast.
Thank you.
This has been really incredible. And I'm so happy that I got to do this.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul that you